What is this?
Brilliant. And welcome to Life Alchemy, our podcast. Between the four of us, we are discussing today work in progress. And I have to admit, we tried to go live about 5 minutes ago, but we scheduled the wrong time. So it's definitely work in progress. No pointing any fingers at anyone. But this podcast today, we are going to be talking about a work in progress. It's between myself, Rosalind, Sarah, and Hema. We're going to get kicked off straight away by going straight into it. And the first thing I want to ask is how many times do you feel like you're searching for progress as opposed to perfection, or perfection over progress? Because that's where I feel it comes from. So who wants to kick off first? Go for it.
I think so yeah, so I've learned not to actually in my very first job interview, it's just a boring story. In my first job interview, I remember I felt quite chuffed with myself because they said, why do you want this job? And I've been invited for this a step up kind of thing. I've been temping in this place. And I said, because I really want to progress. And they said, what does progression mean to you? And I said, progression to me means that I'm continuously learning new things and I'm constantly growing and developing. And I said, it's not attached to a title as such, but the minute, and that's how I've always lived my life. Like the minute I stop, I feel like I'm not learning or growing anymore, then I know that's a sign for me that I have to move on to the next thing. But there are times, definitely, when I've had like big goals and I've got caught up in I've got to be perfect, I've got to be right, I've got to get to that thing. And that it's kind of become overwhelming. And then sometimes I have to take a step back and realize that actually it's all part of the process. Because even when you get to the thing that you think that you want, there's the next thing, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely.
And you're like,
Yeah. Does it consume more of your thoughts away from perfecting it as well? Like when you're with your family, when you're with your friends, when you're away from work or away from that goal?
Well, I was just going to go back to your first question, actually. So, which is, aiming for perfection really was what you were talking about, wasn't it? Rather than progress.
Yeah.
And as demonstrated on our earlier attempt to go live on StreamYard, that would have really thrown me, years ago, because I've just been mortified and thought, I've let everybody down, I didn't get that right. But we're all learning all new platforms and technologies, and also somehow all of us just seem to have a really healthy attitude towards trying and failing and failing better, and failing upwards. And I think that was demonstrated with what happened earlier. And I've been watching that TV program, Can I Improve My Memory? And I just finished watching it last night because even on my course, I've actually been doing memory. And obviously, as I'm wearing my hypnotherapy hat, I know quite a lot about memory and short versus long-term memory and why we recall memories and sometimes don't have memories, all the rest of it. But it was really interesting because the finale, which was last night, the contestants had to learn a language in a week.
No way.
In a week, they had to learn a language to a conversational level, and a kind of a quiz. And they weren't even easy languages. So one had German, one had Portuguese, and one had, this is brilliant. My memory is working so well. It's
working.
What was the other language? Oh, yes, Danish.
Wow.
So they had Danish, Portuguese, and German. And what was really interesting was all of them at the first, when I don't really like languages, I wasn't very good at languages, and they were really struggling. And they were the memory guys who kind of are their coaches and mentors, including this guy called Ed Cook, who's the world memory champion. He was going, just try it, just do it. And they had these guys who between them speak about, some other guys who speak about 20 languages between them. And they were, you have to get over that reluctance to get it wrong. and have a go. And they were saying, we like to get things right. I don't want to have that conversation because it's going to sound terrible and I'm going to get it really. And they were going, you have to. And so the woman who did the best really went for that philosophy. She was like, right, I'm just going to go for it. I don't care how awful it is. I'm not going to learn in any other way. You know, it's like a child. You don't say to them, my God, you've been trying to stand up 5 times this morning. I've been watching and you keep falling over. Give it up for a bad job, you know.
Yeah.
So I think, sort of try and fail upwards and fail better and see it as part of the process.
That's brilliant. I love that, because there's a massive difference between failure and failing, isn't there?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people, when they say they're a failure at something, they're attaching themselves to it.
Yes.
Whereas you're failing at something, there's almost like a detachment from it, like a moving away from it. And so earlier on, when we were messing up with the IT, I didn't feel stressed at all because you weren't stressed. No. You were just like, oh, well, it's one of those things. I'm not meant to be perfect. But it takes the sting out the tail for everyone, doesn't it? And I feel so relaxed being around people like that. But when I'm around people who are, I suppose, trying to search for perfection, trying to get it right, taking themselves too serious, I then match their vibration. I then match their level.
There's dangerous. I was going to say, there's something quite funny, because I was listening to the first question you asked, Chris, and then something quite funny was going on in my head, which therefore means I've confused myself already, and I haven't even said anything, but I'm just going to try and explain it. So I know, right? So you said something around, you know, like, are we striving for, you know, how are we striving for perfection? What does that look like? And Sarah talked a little bit about progress. And the narrative I had was that, oh yeah, so I've got quite, you know, maybe I'm a recovering perfectionist. I know that about myself, and I'm trying my best to, like, you know, not be so perfect and accept that things aren't, and that's constant. And then the alternative script maybe that I've created is, you know, you don't have to be perfect, but you just got to make progress.
Yeah.
And so, but then what happened in my head, which sort of like confused me even further, is like, if we're always striving for progress, does that mean I'm possibly not accepting what is as is and missing something that's right in front of me?
That's a great point.
Because, yeah, I've really confused myself with it in the more, like, in the last few minutes. But I think there is something about, you know, just accepting as is.
I think you're right. I heard someone say something similar about being okay that you're complete being incomplete, so to speak. You know, it's okay. It's perfectly imperfect. That was the title that came out, and I thought that's such a good point that you brought up. Is if we're constantly searching for progress, is that not a little bit of perfectionism just in disguise, just kind of bubbling away in the background? It's
exactly. So that's why this morning, like in the first sentence, I think you shook a core belief of mine where I was like, yeah, progress, what about progress, bro? Then I'm like, oh, hang on a minute. Like, I'm just doing that, you know, like you said, in disguise. Maybe that's what I'm doing.
By definition, I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. Just thought, because I was like, just what you've just said there, Hem, is I guess it depends what perspective you're thinking about it. So if you're thinking of your progress as in, look how far I've come, rather than, okay, it might not have been exactly as I had hoped, but do you know what, I've achieved so much and I've learned so much, and you're looking at it from that point of view. But on the other side of what you're saying is, well, you're looking to the future and you're like, right, I've got to keep, like, what progress am I making, or like present, like what progress am I making, and I need to keep moving forwards. So I guess it's made me think, I completely relate to what you've said, but then I think, is there a distinction between, are you looking at the past or the future? Does that change it?
Yeah,
it's a spectrum, isn't it?
I think that's it in a way. That is the dilemma, if you like. It's not even about perfectionism, because I think I'm a recovered perfectionist, not even a recovering. I'm definitely recovered. And I remember going to Tony Robbins' course in the mid-90s, and I was in such a state because I couldn't get it right that I left. I was like, I'm not going to be in the room, I'm not going to be in the seminar, I can't do it. And somebody actually came and got me, one of the staff, and I remember sitting in a corridor and crying. And then they made me go back into the room wearing my cardigan back to front and messing my hair up and stand on the chair and tell everybody that I was rubbish. And it was kind of crazy, but it was because I was so trying to be perfect.
Yeah.
And then I realized that it was such a low quality because you never get there and you're always beating yourself up. But I think what you're now talking about, there lies the rub. And it's a generational thing as well. So my son has a job. When he went into it, it was like, oh, I'm going to do all these training exams and I'm going to progress, because he had a change of career. And I was like, yeah, and I really helped him. And then I saw him recently and I said, so, you know, how's the, and his exact words to me was, I'm just not feeling it. And, you know, as a baby boomer, it was like, you know, I was literally reaching for scissors, you know, like, what? No, I'm just not feeling it. And I'm like, well, you know, there's times in your career when you just have to do it.
Yeah.
You know, you're not feeling it. And it is that balance, isn't it? And I think the Olympics, it's the Simone Biles, I think that's her name, you know.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't want to push on because I'm not in a good place mentally, etc., physically, versus the just push on through that last one time.
Yeah.
And you know, certainly the SAS, you know, I'm sorry you're not feeling it, but we are in the middle of a war.
Yeah.
You know, and I do need you to go over there and hold that position. And so I think that for me is that's the line that we constantly are renegotiating.
I'd agree with that. And I think you've brought up a really good point there, especially, and I do see this about with us next generation coming through, is they don't want to master anything. They don't want to push through the monotony and the mundaneness of constantly turning up and repeating, because mastery is two things. It's boring and it's painful. If you want to master something, it is monotonous, it is tedious, it is kind of finite. But then also on the flip side is it's really painful because you have to ask yourself some really tough questions as you're going through it, and you face yourself as you're going through it. I think what comes up for me is ego plays a huge part, doesn't it? That kind of conversation in the mind between the true self, which is content and happy and okay being incomplete, so to speak. And the other side is, I want more, I need to be shown more. Does anybody, do you have a wrestle with your ego ever?
All the time.
Every day. All the time.
Where does it come from? Is it a comparison to the outside world, or is it that it's just not good enough for you? Because for me, it probably manifests itself as comparison to the outside world.
Sometimes I think more now for me as I get older, it's more about me knowing what values and standards I can hold myself to. I've been doing quite a lot of work with people on what I call rules, which are bullshit rules.
Love it.
I didn't invent it, just so you know. Vision from A-Fest invented it, but I just think it's brilliant. So it's like a lot of the time is, you know, what's your rule, you know, and your rules are usually because your parents expected it, or because that was the way you were brought up, or because that's what society thinks you should do. And so I think first of all you have to get the rules out of the way, or you have to call out the rules and go, well, am I doing this just because I don't want to let my dad down, or I don't want to, no, that might be a noble thing, but it might also be, you know, I'm an accountant. I hate being an accountant. It's because my dad was an accountant and he's had a really good career as an accountant. I wanted to be an artist. I have been miserable for 30 years. You know, at least call the brawl out.
I like that.
Chris, when you asked the question about ego, like I was thinking the most prominent area it comes up for me is in when it comes to interpersonal relationships, more than like goals or things that I'm working towards. And it comes up with things like when I sort of reactions or how I deal with certain maybe difficult conversations and things like that, or how I respond to people. And so I'll know that if I have a strong reaction, it's probably something to do with my ego.
Yeah.
So then it makes me kind of think, well, hang on a minute, like take a step back and think, well, actually, what's really going on? Because I think for me, it's coming to do with like trying to protect myself. So the ego's like, you don't deserve that, or blah, 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 or they should do this and they should do that. But then actually, a lot of the time, it's actually my ego that's sort of getting in the way. And once I kind of spend some time and kind of hear it out and let it go, then I can just move on.
Yeah. What makes it difficult then? Sorry, Hannah. What makes it difficult? What makes the conversation difficult though?
It'll be something like if I feel offended, or if I feel unsupported, or criticized, or something like that. And a lot of the time it could be actually just my interpretation is wrong.
That's interesting.
It would just be some kind of something from the past or whatever, some kind of knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah.
And then when I actually take a look and I think about it and I look at the different perspectives, so actually what could the different perspectives be? What could their different perspectives be? And I take some time out to kind of look at the Casey Byron, like the work.
Yeah.
The perspectives, like looking at my own perspectives and all the different perspectives. And then I realize actually one of those others is actually probably truer than my own, because there's always different, what is it they say, there's three truths. There's like in relationships or whatever, there's your truth, the other person's truth, and then the actual truth.
Yeah.
So when it comes to ego, I think mine definitely shows up a lot when it comes to other people, how I'm meant to.
I think you're right. Go on, Hammer. You were going to say something there.
No, I was just going to say, I can agree with Sarah actually, because I think when you're on your own, you can do a lot of work. I think whether you're a reflective person, or I think it helps for me personally, being trained as a coach, I think you get a bit better at like hearing those own voices inside your head, like when is your ego showing up versus when you're in a state of balance and you are, there's you just feel and operate differently. But but we're all human, aren't we? So when we have an interaction with someone and it creates an uncomfortable feeling, it's sometimes a bit more difficult to spot when that's happening, because you react, because we're all people, we're emotional beings. And one of the things that I did in a coaching session once was almost the coach got me to draw those different voices inside my head, like different parts of you, as it were. And so I've read a book as well, In the Artist's Way, where they almost get you to draw your demon. It's effectively your ego and it's hindering your creativity, but you actually draw it. So I drew this thing that looked a little bit like a fat Tasmanian devil with horns and everything. It was a bit weird. And then I stuck it up and you drew a cross on it. So symbolically, you could see when that comes up, how do you sort of cancel it out, basically, or aware of it. And it was really powerful. Like, it sounds like quite a sort of basic exercise, but actually it was really useful to get your head to like anchor to like noticing and seeing your ego and when it's in play and how does it make you feel, and then gives you a room to sort of like just notice it and then respond differently, I guess.
That's brilliant.
No, it's great. And there's a part of what I'm trained in is what's called parts therapy. It's actually called parts therapy because we have these parts, and some of those parts are really, really not very helpful at all, and really counterproductive. They're those little devils, the monkey. I think I told you that my Canadian client refers to the voice in her head as the itty bitty shitty committee.
Magic.
I love it now, but the Canadian voice, so the itty bitty shitty committee, and and so a lot of therapy is about understanding, identifying those parts, and putting a big cross
Yeah,
Oh.
that's brilliant. I love that. I love that. And do you know what? I think you've hit on a really good point there. And I was just thinking, especially when Sarah and Hannah were talking, that when you are triggered, actually that's a really simple sign that you're in an ego state. If you are triggered, if you are offended, you are pitching yourself up against something or someone. And in that state, you're in an ego state. You can't be your true self.
You're actually, to be technically correct again, you're in a super ego state.
Really?
Because actually, and this is a whole conversation we could have another time.
Definitely.
We give ego a bad rap, and actually ego in its kind of psychological true sense of the word is absolutely essential for you to kind of, I am, therefore, know who you are. The things we don't like about the ego are really the super ego.
Well, that is amazing. That is a conversation for another time. I would love to delve deeper into that. So let's move it on now. So we always do the section on who to follow, WTF. So anything that's come up in this session, anything that you've seen over the last few weeks or over the last few years of your work, anything that you feel could help. For me, that Brules is absolutely brilliant, Roz. I really love it.
Vision from A-Fest, and he wrote a book called The Code of the Extraordinary Mind.
Interesting.
So, give credit where credit's due, because that was him who coined that.
That's fantastic. But it's just a really good starting point, isn't it, for a sensible conversation with someone to say, hang on a second, what's following you about? What you brought forward that just isn't helping you move forward? So anyone else who to follow?
I'll go next. I was thinking about it this morning and then realised I had a book for it, so I found it. I don't know if you can see it. Hang on.
Oh, Wabi
Cool.
Sabi.
Yeah, Wabi Sabi by Beth Kempton. And I've dipped in and out of it, but it's a really good book, and it's all about kind of looking at your life differently, so accepting the imperfections, going, aging with grace, not striving for perfection, seeing the beauty in nature. Like, there's lots of really interesting Eastern kind of philosophies that I think it just gets you to change your perspective or look at things in a little bit differently. And there's a quote in there somewhere which it says something like, Zen is not about, Zen's about actually accepting actuality, like accepting what's going on rather than trying to find something. And I thought that was quite interesting. It probably speaks back to my looking for progress versus accepting what is. But yeah, it's a really good book, really simple, really beautifully told, I think. So I'd recommend that.
Thanks, Hannah. That's great. Roz?
Well, I'll go with The Code of the Extraordinary Mind, I think. If I can have a second vote, I always go for Brené Brown, Daring Greatly.
That's great.
I read that book when I was in a very bad place, going through a divorce, and I just felt very broken. And like a failure, really, and Brené Brown really spoke to that and turned that around for me, that I was a work in progress, and I was okay. I was going through some difficult progress at that time, but I could dare greatly to be better, and I'd like to say I'm living proof of that, so thank you, Brené.
I love it how someone else's words in a book or a podcast or just in a conversation can not just change the course of your life, but just completely change your perspective and your outlook at a time when you need it. I do feel like it's those simple steps that are there, they're planted there by some other force. Brilliant. Sarah?
Just a quote. I don't know who said it, but I've seen it on cards, which is, look at how far you have come, not how far you have to go. And I think just around that is just, just really taking some time to maybe list out all the things that you've achieved. And something I like to do with some clients, and lots of people do this, is a timeline of your life, really, and just sort of all the highs and the lows and all of the kind of things you learn along the way. And the fact that you're where you are, like, I'm sure every single person has been through so much, but we just don't actually appreciate, we don't take time to really acknowledge it. So look at how far you have come, not how far you have to go.
Brilliant. What a lovely one to end on. I really love that quote as well. So that brings us towards the end of our podcast now. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you've enjoyed it. This has been a work in progress. We are still a work in progress, definitely. We all agree on that. And our next subject, do you want to take a stab at it? Anyone? Any suggestions?
How about setting boundaries and saying no?
Yes.
Oh,
Magic. Well done,
I'm
Emma.
dealing with that in my course. So perfect.
Fantastic.
Perfect.
And on that note, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.